Good evening, Dr. Armstrong here. We are in the shop today, as you can see. We're talking about biomechanics. This is in chapter 4, part of it. And I'm going to give a few demonstrations to you, hopefully in an effort to demonstrate and illustrate some of the principles that you have been reading about. Now, I'll be moving about. The camera is stationary. If I go out of the picture, forgive me. I'll be right back as soon as I can. I'm going to start out with a demonstration that you may have done in the past, maybe even tried or seen. I'm sitting on a stool. You can't really see that from here. But if I'm sitting straight up and I try to get up straight without bending forward, can't do it. Can't do it. Okay? If I bend forward far enough, yes, I can do it. Okay, what happened? I manipulated my center of gravity. I made the comment a while back that all sport movement is either an effort to maintain equilibrium or to upset equilibrium. Now, it all has to do with center of gravity, and sometimes we can do that with our own center of gravity. Sometimes we need apparatus in order to do that, to manipulate. So I'm going to grab an 8-pound shot. Here's an 8-pound shot. Now, we'll count this as an apparatus, an implement, if you will, in track and field. Okay, so we proved that I can't get up like this. Now, what happens to my center of gravity as I take this 8 pounds and stick it out here? Okay, I can't come straight up, but I have to lean forward just a little, as opposed to without it, leaning forth a lot. Okay, so just an illustration of how we tend to use implements, levers, apparatus, anything along the way to help manipulate our center of gravity. Now, another example of this would be a tightrope walker. Now, I doubt if any of you are going to end up doing that. You may, however, do something close by walking on the balance beam, possibly. I have a nice picture in the text of a person on the tight wire, and this was in an illustration to demonstrate the idea of extending the lever or the extremity in an effort to keep balance. Now, I have a couple of, I'm going to use this stick to begin with, and okay, so I'm on a balance beam. Okay, so what good is this going to do me here? My arms are longer than that. Okay, so if I just kind of, and this is what we tend to do, we tend to balance. As we lose our balance, we tend to shift, and extending the levers tend to broaden our overall mass. So this really does no good. However, if I were to take a lever this long, and this doesn't weigh very much, but if it was a long, heavy lever, probably 2 or 3 times the length, like they might use on a tight wire, I want you to notice how little it takes to move the ends. Okay? Now, the end may end up the arc may be this big, while here the arc is maybe this long. However, the entire lever moves in terms of the same amount of turning at the center. It's kind of like if you have a bicycle wheel and you turn it from here or you turn it from here. Okay, another example would be a very large clock where you can get up close and see the minute hand, and you can actually watch at the very end of it, you can see it move. But it's not moving overall any more than if it were just a centimeter long. You get what I'm saying? And this all has to do, in terms of efficiency, in terms of as I move this just a little bit, it's moving a lot out there at the ends, which enables me to spread out my mass, and I can adjust my center of gravity very easily with little effort. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about choosing the best lever. Now I have several things up here on this board. You really can't see them very well, but you'll have to take my word for it. I have some nails, I have some screws in here, and if I were to try to take, what's the way that we tend to take nails out of a board? Well, we'll grab a hammer, a claw hammer, and stick it in here. Now these aren't in very deeply, and so I probably, working hard enough, which I just did, I can take those out pretty easily. Okay, here we have a small crowbar. All right, now again, this isn't in very deep. I probably could take it out pretty easily, but what if I couldn't? What if it's really sunk in there? All right, and this just isn't long enough. I'm not getting enough leverage. So I take the longer crowbar. Now, what have I essentially done? I've lengthened the lever. I have more leverage. Now, this is not unlike what we just demonstrated with this long pole. It's the distance that this lever pulls down here is the same if I were to use the smaller crowbar, except that up here on the top, it takes less effort to go the same distance. Okay? If you've ever changed a tire in your car, you had a flat tire and you changed it, probably the jack that they provided in the trunk may have been just very standard, very short, may have been tough to get it, but if you had a longer jack or an extension of some sort, it's a lot easier. You're turning it the same amount at the middle, at the center, and keep in mind that as we segue to the body, we talk about the center, we're talking about the joint, where two bones articulate, where there's movement, like the elbow or the knee. Okay? Now, this, by the way, is a first-class lever. Hopefully you recognize that. First-class lever. Now, I have a couple of screws in here. Now, this screw right here, you obviously can't see. It's not a Phillips or a slotted, but it has a square kind of a head. So this is a screwdriver that you can fit a different bit into. Okay, notice that the diameter of the handle is not very big. Okay, and so again, this isn't put in here real tightly, but let's say it was and I can't get it out. What do I do? What do I do? Well, I could get a longer handle screwdriver, or I could get a screwdriver with a greater diameter handle. Now, in essence, what kind of a lever is this? Well, you can read in the literature where it may say that a screwdriver is a first-class lever. I tend to lean towards it being a second-class lever. You'll recall that a second-class lever always has a mechanical advantage. Now, it may not be a great advantage, but mechanically it is an advantage. And so I'll let you ponder that. And what I appreciate about this is that it's not an absolute, at least in my mind, for this course. As you understand it, that's the most important thing. So I've taken a better lever. I've chosen a better lever. Now I do have couple of screws in here with Phillips heads. This is one right here. Here's a small Phillips head screwdriver. Okay, this isn't going to work out real well. Okay, it just doesn't give me that kind of leverage, especially in regard to the handle. So I go up a little bigger, and it's a little easier just to get it started. I go up a little higher. Now this, interesting enough, is a ratcheted screwdriver, and it's a lot easier to use, but it's a bigger handle, and it's going to be much more efficient for me. Again, screwdriver, second class lever. All right. Questions? Okay, I didn't think so. Interesting illustration that I've used in the past that I really like is, these are galvanized fittings. This is what you would find maybe in the basement of an old house in terms of plumbing. Now, in order to get these off, to get them apart, usually you just have to use a pipe wrench. All right. Now I've got small to medium to large length, but I want to start off with a wrench, if you will, that you may never have seen. This is a rubber grip wrench, and it fits on the fitting like so. You tighten it up, and now this isn't in real tight, so it's pretty easy to move, but it goes like so. Now, why can't I get that moving very easily? Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with the levers necessarily, as much as it has to do with friction. Now, in chapter 4, I deal with it quite a bit in one of the PowerPoints. Talk about friction and how, in this particular case, since this is smooth rubber, you don't get much friction, and this is really what you want. Now, in terms of a pipe wrench, obviously you got a lot of friction because you have these jaws. Now, I have, I have this small pipe wrench. It's about a 10-inch, and hook it onto this particular. Okay, what I'm doing now is tightening. Okay, I'm going to tighten this up, and it goes pretty easily until I get to really want to pull hard, so it's almost squeaky tight. Okay, it's kind of a tough go, so I choose a little longer lever. Okay, in essence, what have I done? I have done the same thing that I did with the crowbar. I'm taking a longer lever where the farther out I go with the longer radius, the greater the force potential. Okay, so all of a sudden this is really easy to take off or to put on. Okay, but what happens when I get to the point where I want to take this off? Well, I may have tightened it so tightly that the 14-inch won't do it, and I have to jump to the 18-inch pipe wrench. Okay, so I put this on here. I'm gonna take this off, and you'll see how easily this goes with the long handled wrench. Again, a longer lever. And now, how do we choose longer levers in sport? How does this work? How do we segue to sport? For instance, a bat. You've probably used, when you first started to play softball or baseball, you had a choice of a shorter bat or a longer bat. And if you were a little kid and there's only a couple of bats there, and they were both long, and they told you to choke up. So you took the bat, and it was just too long and it was too unwieldy, so you choked up. What happens now? More control. But does it give me as much power? No. What I've done is shortened the radius as opposed to a longer radius. Okay, more power, but it's a little harder to manipulate. Less power, a little bit easier to swing. So you give up one thing for the other. One of the illustrations I like to use is pole vaulting in track and field. The world record right now in the pole vault is 20 feet and change. Okay, so the longest poles they use are about between 17 and 18 feet. And so they're able to push off at the end and go 2 feet above the height of the pole. Well, why not use a 20-foot pole? Okay, well, and this was one of the questions I believe in this last quiz, had to do with the point of diminishing returns. Okay, I could get a 20-foot pole, I could get a 25-foot pole, but what would happen? It would be so heavy and unwieldy, I wouldn't be able to carry it down the runway quite as fast and plant and get up with it. All right, same thing goes in golf. Here I have a 9-iron, really short club. Okay, it's not designed to go a long way, depending on how good you are, how well you hit it. Maybe, 100 to 150 yards, something like that. Okay, it's a shorter club, easier to swing, not quite the power, as opposed to, see the difference there in terms of the driver? Okay, we've got a long driver. It's meant to take the ball farther, more power because it's a longer lever. Well, why don't I get what is this, maybe 3.5 feet? Why don't I get about a 6-foot driver? Well, let's go to a 10-foot driver. Why not? Well, once again, how well could I swing a 10-foot driver? Not very well. I don't even do real well on a 3.5 foot. The point of diminishing returns. So choosing your lever is very important. There is an example I like to show in terms of shortening the lever and speeding up. Okay, every time you shorten the lever, you tend to speed that lever up. Now, if we have any discus throwers in the audience, and let's say they're a right-handed thrower, if you watch very closely, like in a video, or actually watch the thrower, as the thrower comes through with the right arm, you're going to watch that left arm fold up. Why is that? Why does the left arm fold up? It's because when you shorten a lever, it speeds it up. And right at the very end of the throw, you want to go faster, slower to faster. Now, one of the ways to demonstrate this is to take your arms like this and go like this as fast as you can. Now, bring them in here, go as fast as you can. If you try that, you'll see what I'm talking about. You shorten the lever, and you have speeded up. Okay? Okay, Newton's third law. Just a couple of things in regard to that. I really like the example I have in the text in regard to the continuum of running surfaces, and in terms of starting with running in sand or jumping in sand all the way up to concrete or stone. And the idea is what it gives back. Now, you can't really see my feet, but I have a pad on the cement floor that is not very thick, and it's foam, a hard foam, and it tends to absorb some of the walking around. Okay, that's the idea of comfort. Running tracks. Now, if you've been on the indoor track at Olivet, and if you have, you could talk to the coaches, or if you know something about the running surfaces, you'll know that the indoor track at Olivet is a very thin material, relatively thin. Okay, so, and if you go out to the outdoor track, it's a thicker poured material. Indoor, it's like a carpet that was laid out. I was there one of the days they were putting it in. It was very interesting to watch. But outside, it's a poured material, and it's much thicker. So the outdoor track takes in and absorbs some of that energy, and so it's really good for training. But if you were to compare it with, if you took world-class sprinters and asked which track surface they wanted to race on, they would choose the indoor track because it gives back the energy you're putting into it. because of its thin surface and it's harder. Okay. Now I've got an interesting demonstration of this. Let me turn my vise around and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, this is, it's kind of an anvil. I know it's at the end of your picture, but let's say that if you watch the hammer on the anvil, watch how it just kind of tends to bounce back up. Okay, that is you jumping or landing, if you will, on a really, really hard surface. So what happens? It gives back, okay, and you land hard on a hard surface, and you haven't done anything to manipulate that conservation of momentum. Now, what I have here is what is called a dead blow hammer. Now, what you may or may not be able to hear, this has little shot particles in it. Okay, so it's not solid. So when I hit a hard surface with this, it doesn't go anywhere. That's what you're trying to achieve in terms of hard surfaces and landing. Here's an example. If you've done box jumps in plyometrics, where you jump off the box, maybe it's a foot high, 18 inches high, and you land. How do you want to land? Well, you want to land with a bent knee so that you are absorbing some of that energy coming back so that you don't hit really hard. And that's the same thing as using this dead blow hammer versus the solid hammer. And this all has to do with the principle of the conservation of momentum. If you haven't read about this, I deal with it in both the text and the PowerPoints. Probably, and by the way, you're going to find an extension of the material in the PowerPoints, more examples, more pictures, and so hopefully a combination of the two of those will help you understand the principle. Okay, finally, Bernoulli's principle. And Bernoulli's principle says that there's an inverse relationship between the pressure of a liquid or a gas and its velocity. Now, we're not going to talk a lot about that in this session right now. It's getting kind of cold in the garage. And but I want you to read about it. We'll talk about it in another video. But I want to give you one demonstration of Bernoulli's principle. And hopefully I'll have it set in such a way that you can actually see it working. This is the coup d'etat of our demonstrations. What I have here is an electric leaf blower and a rubber ball. And what you're going to see, you may have seen this demonstration before, but I've always found it interesting and kind of entertaining, but it all has to do with Bernoulli's principle. So I'll just let you watch, and then you can think about this. You didn't know there would be magic tricks in this video. That is based on Bernoulli's principle. So make sure you read up on that, and we'll talk some more about that later on. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend if this is when you're watching it. See you next time.